As Turkey digs out from a devastating earthquake, the country is asking, why was the damage so bad? Hi there, everyone. This is Plain English, where we use current events and trending topics to help you upgrade your English. By listening here, you can experience the world in your new language at the right speed and with a lot of great support on our website, plainenglish.com. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, and this is lesson number 554. You can find the full lesson at plainenglish.com/554. Coming up today, in 2013, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan sent a tweet that said this: "Buildings kill, not earthquakes." He meant that strong and safe buildings should protect people from earthquakes. So the best defense against a big earthquake is to build solid, resistant buildings. It was good advice, but Erdogan's government didn't follow that advice. And now, 10 years later, a major earthquake hit Turkey and killed tens of thousands of people under a rubble of badly constructed buildings. The expression we'll talk about today is bear the blame. Let's get started. Turkey sits along two major fault lines, making it vulnerable to earthquakes. In 1999, a big one hit in the Dushe region not far from Istanbul. It killed about 18,000 people. And in the early hours of February 6th this year, 2023, another big one hit, this time in the country's southeast. It was followed by thousands of aftershocks. Officially, over 47,000 people died in Turkey and Syria in the February earthquakes. The number of dead and missing is still rising. Other estimates have it much higher. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been a force in Turkish politics for over a quarter of a century. For the last 20 years, he's been either the president or prime minister. Before that, he was mayor of Istanbul, Turkey's largest city. Just weeks ago, Erdogan's grip on power seemed secure. But the earthquake may shake more than just the ground. It could shake up Turkey's politics too. That's because there are two major criticisms being leveled at the government after the earthquake. And there are national elections coming this spring. The first criticism is that Turkey's government was slow to send critical rescue equipment to the earthquake region. After the earthquake hit, many people were buried under the rubble. They were trapped inside collapsed buildings. When this happens, there is an essential window of just a few days to rescue anyone who is trapped. Turkey's government was slow to send cranes and other heavy machinery that was needed to help lift massive concrete slabs of collapsed buildings. This stood in contrast to the relatively quick response to the 1999 earthquake. This time, the affected areas waited days for a critical response from the army. This delay cost lives as people were not rescued in time. Erdogan himself admitted that the winter weather contributed to delays sending rescue material and equipment. As bad as this was, though, it was an error of execution. The other criticism is far more devastating. The earthquake has revealed that much of the country's construction in recent years was not done up to code, and as a result, buildings collapsed when the earth shook, trapping people underneath. Building codes were updated after the 1999 earthquake, and then were updated again 5 years ago. But planners say that contractors frequently submit legal plans when they seek initial approval, but then they don't follow those plans during construction. And inspections of the final product are weak. For example, concrete columns contribute to a building's stability, but they also take up valuable space. After getting plans approved, some builders would narrow the width of the columns on lower floors to make more room for commercial space, but the lower floors are exactly where the columns do their hardest work. In large buildings, concrete should be reinforced with steel rebar to make the concrete more stable. But many contractors would use less steel than required, or none at all, in the final construction. None of this was a secret. It was well known in Turkey that these kinds of construction shortcuts resulted in buildings that did not meet legal standards. So in 2019, Turkey's government issued a nationwide amnesty for builders, which legalized many tens of thousands of buildings that had not been built up to code, as long as the developers paid fines. The amnesty law forgave violations of the law in construction and made building owners responsible for safety in case of an earthquake. Engineers, academics, and architects warned at the time that this was dangerous and put people's lives at risk. One professional organization issued a stark statement. Zoning amnesty is an invitation to death, they said. The government thought otherwise. It said the amnesty was a key driver of economic growth. What it did not say out loud, though, is that the construction industry is a key political supporter of the ruling party. There are even videos of Erdogan at the time boasting of solving the problem of bad construction by offering zoning peace, his word for the amnesty. But many of the areas that got this zoning peace are anything but peaceful today. An estimated 85,000 buildings in the earthquake zone collapsed, including many that Erdogan claimed credit for legalizing. Entire cities were left without power and water in the frigid winter. Turkey's government has scrambled to defend its record. Erdogan, in defending the amnesty, said that 98% of all buildings that collapsed in the earthquake zone were built before 1999, implicitly absolving himself of blame. Prominent architecture and engineering groups have called that estimate unrealistic, adding that it's impossible to have made a credible estimate so quickly. Besides, satellite images show entire neighborhoods were constructed in the last 2 decades. The government is also arresting property managers, contractors, and others that they say are responsible for low-quality buildings. Since the amnesty placed building owners in charge of earthquake safety, building owners are subject to arrest. The Justice Ministry announced it would create an Earthquake Crimes Investigation Bureau. The national government is getting much of the criticism in the immediate aftermath of this disaster, and it bears much of the blame. But a problem this big has many causes. Local governments, developers, planners, contractors, and building owners all share the blame for an industry that was rife with corruption. The government will loudly hold contractors accountable for the role that they, the contractors, played in the disaster. But it will be up to Turkey's citizens to hold the many layers of government and society accountable for their part. There's a lot of human devastation that's just heartbreaking, but this is a part of the world with a long and rich history. There are historical sites going back centuries, covering past civilizations, and those crumbled too. Some can be restored, but probably not all of them. Now, we have a lot of listeners in Turkey. We even have some in Syria, but we have a lot in Turkey. So we certainly send our best wishes to anyone who lives in that southern region or who has relatives there. Today's English expression is to bear the blame. When you say someone bears the blame for something, you believe that this person is responsible for something bad that has happened. Blame can be a noun or a verb. When it's a verb, you say, I blame JR for making us late. That means I believe that JR is responsible for making us late. But in the expression bear the blame, blame is a noun and it means responsibility for something bad. So blame as a noun is a very passive thing. There is no action involved. And notice also that it's an opinion, and not everyone will have the same opinion. Usually, one person is saying that another person is at fault. It's that other person who bears the blame. But this is an opinion. So imagine I say, JR bears the blame for making us late. I mean that it's JR's fault that we're late. JR did things or didn't do things, and the result is we're late. Now notice, JR doesn't have to agree with this. He doesn't even have to know that I said it. But in my mind, as the speaker, I think JR is at fault, so I say JR bears the blame for making us late. So imagine JR and I have an important business meeting to attend at 11 o'clock a.m. If JR oversleeps and we don't arrive until 11:45, then I can say that JR bears the blame for making us late. But listen, he doesn't have to agree. Maybe I said that I'd call him at 9 o'clock a.m. to wake him up, but maybe I didn't do that. And then JR might say I bear some of the blame. And when something bad happens, there can be multiple people at fault. So the full blame doesn't necessarily belong to just one person. In cases like that, you can say, JR bears most of the blame, but I admit that I bear some of the blame too. You can say, bear some of the blame, much of the blame, most of the blame, all of the blame, whatever. The other thing about bear the blame is that the person you're talking about either feels bad about it or should feel bad about it. So let's go back to our example. Imagine JR and I are on time and we're walking to the meeting and JR trips and falls on the sidewalk, injures his wrist, and we have to go to the hospital. That's an accident. I would never say JR bears the blame for making us late. He doesn't have to feel bad about that. So if there's an accident or if there's no fault, if there's no reason to feel bad, then don't use the word blame. We talked about FTX a few weeks ago. Many people, including government prosecutors in multiple countries, they believe Sam Bankman-Fried, the now 30-year-old founder, they think he bears the blame for the collapse of the business and the loss of billions of dollars of customer money. They believe that Sam Bankman-Fried's actions or inactions caused a terrible thing. They believe he is responsible and that he should feel bad about it. They believe he bears the blame for the collapse of FTX. Now, Sam Bankman-Fried has apologized for making some mistakes, but he doesn't necessarily agree that he bears the blame for the full crisis. Now, this is a great illustration of how bear the blame is more about the opinion of the speaker than about the person named in the sentence. If I believe Sam Bankman-Fried is at fault, I would say Sam Bankman-Fried bears the blame. But he has a different opinion, and that's fine. When he talks, he can say that his rivals at CoinDesk bear some of the blame. Today's current events lesson was about the earthquake and the sad consequences of bad construction in Turkey. Most of the media attention is on the national government, and the national government, I said, bears much of the blame for the low quality of construction in Turkey. Now notice, this is my opinion. I'm the speaker here at Plain English, and when I say Turkey's national government bears much of the blame, I'm sharing my opinion. It's safe to say that Turkey's national government has another opinion. Now notice I also said bears much of the blame, and that means my opinion is there are other people who also bear some of the blame. So yes, the national government granted a sweeping amnesty, allowing badly constructed buildings to stay standing. But in many cases, building contractors decided to construct buildings that were lower quality. And building owners didn't seem to mind too much when they were saving money on construction, and the local governments didn't do the inspections they should have. So does the national government bear the entire blame? Not in my opinion. They bear much of the blame, as I said, but I think a lot of other people have to bear some of the blame for the terrible consequences of this earthquake. Here's another one of those quotes that you don't have to agree with it to appreciate it. Some of you will agree with it. I won't say whether I agree or not, but remember, I am the one who chooses the quote. Here it is by Anthony Burgess. Ready? Youth thinks itself wise, just as drunk men think themselves sober. So a drunk man thinks he's sober because he doesn't know any better. So too, a young person thinks he is wise because he doesn't know any better. Those are Anthony Burgess's words, not mine. Youth thinks itself wise, just as drunk men think themselves sober. All right, that's it for today. Coming up on Thursday, if you never had the pleasure of playing Super Mario Brothers on a Nintendo, you or your kids or your grandkids can now enjoy Super Nintendo World, a new theme park based on a 38-year-old video game. Super Mario Brothers came out on September 13th, 1985, and now they are constructing Mario Brothers theme parks almost 38 years later. I have not been, but I did enjoy reading about it, and I think you'll enjoy hearing about it on Thursday. See you then.